So it's absolutely right and proper that we're able to launch both of these resources here today together, because without the work that Gail and the researchers from University of Stirling and the team that were working with them, and that team has evolved and changed as staff members in Education Scotland have changed, but without their work to really embed the basic principles around learner participation, our work to develop the How Good Is Our School resource would have been more difficult, more challenging. So the two resources are really come together, and we really absolutely encourage you to use all of them. So why did we decide to develop a resource called How Good Is Our School? Well, Gail's mentioned that tweet that came, I think we launched HGIOURS 4 at the Scottish Learning Festival in September 2015, and by the end of the next day, that tweet was out there saying, so where's the resource for the young people? How are they going to use that? And initially, some folk thought that we would be able to do that quite quickly. It became very, very obvious at an early stage, because of the work that Gail and the team involved in the other resource, we were very clear about saying to us, take time. Take time to make sure you engage with children and young people on this. Take time to make sure that we do this well, and we do it in a method of co-production. And so there are many people in this room that have contributed and have commented on early drafts of the resource, so really, really grateful. A lot of the reasons why we decided to publish the resource are absolutely the same reasons why we're publishing the learner participation in educational settings. So I'm not going to repeat some of those, but I want to focus just very quickly on the supporting schools to achieve the aims of curriculum for excellence. And I want you just to reflect and go back to the early messages about curriculum for excellence and who is it for. It is for children and young people across Scotland. It is for learners. And those 4 capacities, which I remember in the early days we had people chanting in their classrooms and in gym halls and so on, early mornings, and at the end of the week people evaluated themselves against those 4 capacities and how learning had contributed to those things. We have moved on, and we've got a broader definition and a much richer understanding now of what curriculum for excellence is about. But essentially, those 4 capacities are still at the heart of what we are trying to do for all of Scotland's learners. And that means that if we want confident individuals, if we want effective contributors in our communities, and we need them much more than ever going forward, where we have more and more challenges coming into our societies, we need our young people to be able to have a voice, to feel confident in saying what they think will make their communities better and richer and more meaningful. And that means that needs to begin in the school. We have to give them the confidence and the real rich understanding that whatever they have to say is valued, and we take it seriously. We don't just want them to tell us about the state of the playground or too much litter or whether they need more toilets or more bins or whatever. We want them to talk to us about learning. We want them to talk to us about what really matters for them in the quality of their education. And that is absolutely at the heart of Curriculum for Excellence. When we launched How Good Is Our School 4, we had a new suite of quality indicators and very deliberately put QI 1.1, the self-evaluation for self-improvement, at the very beginning of the framework. And within that, in this level 5, remember a very good illustration, what makes very good self-evaluation is the voice of all stakeholders, including children and young people. So why did we do that? We didn't think, oh, we'll just put that in there to give the schools a bit of a challenge and let's see if they can actually meet this agenda for us. We did that because our inspection evidence was already showing that this was something that was beginning to grow across Scotland. That where schools had really effective self-evaluation and their school improvement was being the most successful, it was where they were engaging all stakeholders. They were listening very clearly to the voice. And so some of the examples, as Carrie mentioned about that idea of a report card, from pupils, some of those things were already happening. Where brave teachers were actually saying to learners, tell me how I can make my teaching better. Tell me how I can make this lesson better, how I can make this programme of work better, and really then feeding back to children and young people how they were actually going about that. And a lot of our inspection evidence, you'll see a phrase, that kind of you said, we did, and we began to see that emerging across schools, posters, you said, we did, and closing that gap and feeding back to children and young people how their voice and their views were actually being taken on board. So these resources today, and particularly the How Good Is Our School resource, is about building on practice that clearly has been evolving in Scottish education for some time. And we were able to find really good examples of that. One of the first examples that I saw in action was in a school actually in Angus Council, who invited me out to see, quite quickly after HGIOURS 4 had been developed, the head teacher wrote to me an email and said, come and see what we're doing. Our young people have something called We HGIOURS. And that's been our working title internally on this document for Jane and I to know exactly which version of HGIORS we were talking about. We've got affectionately called this the We HGIORS, but we didn't want to steal that title corporately because it belongs to the children in that school who took HGIORS 4 apart themselves, a primary 7 class who the head teacher gave them the teacher version of HGIORS 4 and said, this is what we need to use for our school self-evaluation. Tell me what you think about this and tell me how we can put this into some pupil-friendly language. And their work was really quite an important starting point. But as was work in Aberdeenshire, in Aberdeen City, as work in Fife and North Lanarkshire and other local authorities where we knew there was good practice, we brought together stakeholders and said, help us to create this and get it right. So one of the aspects that's come back through the comments more recently as we've actually got to drafting the report was to have it in 2 parts so that we could have one part that really belonged to the children and young people. And we hope that you will have access to that you'll find it readable, that you'll be able to use it, and you'll encourage youngsters across your schools to have a look at it, and various school committees and classes and so on to get engaged in looking at that document. Part 1, though, we recognise that stakeholders told us, you cannot do this unless the culture and ethos of your school is right. So the first point of action, if you like, for all schools is to evaluate that culture and ethos. Are children's rights really embedded within the culture of your school? Are your staff really listening to the children and young people? And are they the kind of staff that are willing to show that they will adapt their practice and that they actually really value what children and young people have to say in the classroom and more broadly across the life and work of the school? Because the children and young people who worked with us to develop this resource told us that it isn't just about what happens in the classroom. There are wider aspects of school life that they also felt really strongly they have a say in. When we launched HGIOURS 4, one of the things that we got most positive feedback about was the use of the features of highly effective practice and the challenge questions. And quite quickly people were coming back to us and saying, we're using the challenge questions, we're now creating our own challenge questions, our staff use them. We had head teachers who said they put out a challenge question on a weekly basis to get staff thinking about self-evaluation. And so it seemed, again, right and proper that we use that approach to help schools to further self-evaluate the culture and ethos. And so part 1 of the resource is really about helping schools with their partners and with the children and young people together, but led by, if you like, the staff in the school to think, are we ready for using part 2? Are we ready to hand over a set of themes and a set of indicators, if you like, to our young people? And are we really ready to take on board what they have to say and embed that in the way that we change and make improvements in our schools? So there is a set of features of highly effective practice and challenge questions. I have a lot more of those on file. One of my, the biggest job with HGIOURS 4 and with this as the editor, if you like, is always cutting back what people give you in the first instance. So if you run out of these and you can't think of more for yourselves, which I'm sure you will, most of you, come back to us. We'll see what we can do with the others that are still sitting on file. But our real view is that once people get working with this in the same way that they have with HGIOURS 4, you will come up with your own challenge questions. Your staff, your partners, your children and young people, your parents will help you to create more questions to ask that will help you to really think about the value of learner participation in your school. This is the part that I think really shows children and young people that we mean business in terms of listening to them. Triangulation, the looking at what actually is happening, that direct observation. We'll quite often associate that with observing, learning and teaching. Yes, we think that's an important part of school life for young people to have a voice in, but increasingly it's about observing, learning and teaching in all contexts, and that means looking at what's happening across the wider life of the school and to really think about what does a school day look like, what does a school week look like, what does a school year look like, and what is that day-to-day experience for children and young people. But as adults, when we evaluate our schools, we use a lot of data, and we encourage more and more the use of data to make sure that we actually get an accurate picture of what's going on in school. And we think that children and young people have the skills to use some of that data too, to help them to really understand the strengths in their school and the things that need to improve. Now, that doesn't mean that we're giving them open access to everybody's individual data, but there are broad pots of data about schools that are in the public domain that our children and young people can actually work with. And that can give a really rich learning experience as well as helping them to contribute to self-evaluation. And some of you will know, when you want to know what your parents think, really think, who are the best people to go about at a parents' event with a clipboard or nowadays a microphone or a camera, and capture what parents think, what partners think, what other children and young people think. I've seen some great use of things like Big Brother diary rooms, where young people went in and they were able to then say what they think about their school. It's quite interesting, the use of that word video, actually, because one of the things the children and young people did help me to get right was when we talked about making a video in the resource, shows about my teaching career. They came back and said, no, we'll make a blog, or we'll make a vlog, or we'll make this, or we'll make that, but we won't be making any videos, probably. We've moved on. But that sense of gathering views, the youngsters know what is important to find out about, and they're quite capable of holding a focus group. They're quite capable of creating a survey. We ask them to do that all across the curriculum anyway. They're quite capable of actually doing a lot of the things that we spend as adults and as teachers in schools a lot of time agonising over. Some of those things we can hand over for them to take charge of right from the outset in the planning process, and then that's part of their learning experience too. Part 2, as I said, has been created for the children and young people themselves. It is about saying to them, get involved. We take your views seriously. We want to hear what you think, and we want to make it better as a result of that. And we need you to help us to make it better. And that's really important. Oh, sorry. That's a good way of finishing quickly, isn't it? We ran some workshops, and we created, together with actually Gail and the team who were involved in the other resource, helped us to create some workshops that we then sent out to our stakeholders right across Scotland, and sometimes individual schools. We used the workshop materials. Sometimes it was groups, like in Fife, brought a number of school pupils together and worked in bigger teams to actually think about the quality indicators that were in How Good Is Our School and what makes them really important, which bits of those were really important to the children and young people. That's what they gave us back in terms of their analysis of all of those things and the kind of themes that are in HGIOURS 4. But they very quickly told us, we don't want a document that just looks like this adult document. We don't need all these quality indicators, because there are some aspects of that are more the professional aspects of school life around management and so on. And they felt they were quite happy for some of those things to be left with the staff. So they asked us really to think about 5 really important things for them. They told us these are the key things that are important in our school: relationships, learning and teaching, school and community, health and well-being, and successes and achievement. So what we've done is we've used those 5 themes as the framework for the children and young people's support materials. And In the appendix to part 1, for the adults, if you like, we have aligned the relevant HGIOURS 4 QIs, so that when you take the evidence that your children and young people bring to you around those 5 themes, your job as staff in schools and local authorities is to help to align that to your wider school self-evaluation, and not to worry the children and young people about all of that. Each of the themes has these 3 aspects. So again, using the features of highly effective practice, we didn't want to say to schools, or here to children and young people, this is a level 5 description or illustration of your school. Here's what a very good school might look like, because we know that some aspects of what might be very good in one school community might be quite different in a different school community. So we've given them some examples of the sorts of things that we think should be in a school around this theme, and what we would look for as inspectors and what you would look for as staff in terms of being proud of your schools. And then we've asked them to think about some of the suggested evidence gathering activities, and you'll recognise some of those. They are about focus groups, surveys, mapping out things, taking learning walks, taking photographs, analysing, talking to people, what's going on. And then to discuss them, and we've given them not challenge questions, but some suggestions of kinds of questions that will get them started. We know that very quickly they will come up with their own questions and their own ideas. Done it again? Yeah, I'll just finish off. There is no 6-point scale in the learner version of HGIOURS 4. We deliberately felt it would not be fair to ask young people, and not right to ask young people, and they didn't want to. They told us, we don't want to be saying whether our school is excellent or very good, and we don't want to be thinking, is it satisfactory, because that doesn't help us to actually be proud of our school. What we want to do is to get involved in thinking about the richness of what is working well in our school. Both of the publications should now be online on the Education Scotland website and on the hub. So again, just commend them to you, and thank you for coming along this morning.